welcome to a special edition of True Talk. My name is Paul Truesdell, and joining me today will be a gentleman by the name of James Jett. Now, James has made the news across the state of Florida, and for that matter, all across the nation with his candidacy for the United States Congress. We're going to get into the details about his candidacy and what all this is all about. He's here in our office, and we're going to suspend our normal broadcast for Truesdell.tv and True Talk. Kelly will rejoin me next week. But we think we've got a real explosive issue. As you know, last week we talked extensively about all the shenanigans that have been going on here in Marion County, the state of Florida, the political corruption, the Hatch Act, etc. And one of those situations that popped up was an issue involving Congress. A fellow by the name of Cliff Stearns, who's a congressman here in the state of Florida. And we talked about Karen Thurman. We talked about eavesdropping and just a whole bunch of things, which we are going to encourage you to take a look at that again. But today, tying right into that topic is James Jett. Now, James is a clerk of the court up in Clay County here in Florida. A really good quality stand-up guy that has been in office for quite some time. I've had the pleasure to meet him and talk with him, and we invite him to come in. And with that, please welcome James Jett.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, let's get into some real hardcore, just real factual items. Make sure. Who are you? Give us your 3-minute drill on who James Jett is and why are you running for Congress?
Well, I'm a lifelong member of Clay County, Florida.
Okay.
I was raised there, went to schools there, graduated from the University of Central Florida with a law enforcement degree, came back to Clay County to actually work in law enforcement. I was a police officer, an investigator, a sergeant, and a lieutenant with the Orange Park Police Department when I was approached to run for county commissioner within that county.
What year was that?
That was in 1982. And I ran in 1982, was elected.
Oh, so you were leaving about the time I was coming I'd already been an officer up in Wisconsin, but I came into Tampa in the early 80s. So you're leaving when I'm coming in.
Well, I'm a little bit older than you.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I graduated from Jacksonville Police Academy with honors and actually was able to attend the FBI National Academy on behalf of Orange Park and be the second one in the history of Clay County to do so.
Very impressive.
So I did that, was elected county commissioner for 3 terms, and then ran for clerk of courts and have been there for 14 years.
As county commissioner, I know you had something interesting happen to you.
Well, a couple of things. As a county commissioner, I'm a very conservative person now, and I was then. And because of my votes against higher taxes, I became known in the media as the taxpayer's friend. But the thing you're talking about, Paul, is as chairman of the county commission, I was approached by a person that wanted to zone a hazardous waste storage facility in that county. We had turned down the zoning for it, and the guy on behalf of the company came there and asked me to take a $30,000 bribe to help zoning that. I wore a body bug, working with the state attorney's office, tapped my phones in the state attorney's office with them in charge of the investigation. He was arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced in jail.
Regardless of whether you were a law enforcement officer or not, it's a pucker factor, isn't it? Those things go down.
It was quite different than doing anything as an investigator when you're on the other side.
When you're on the other side, yeah.
No doubt about it.
Okay, so you've got a reputation of not taking any guff from people like this.
Absolutely. I stand on my own. Okay.
So now you become the clerk of the court. A lot of people do not understand what a clerk of the court here. In Marion County here, we have David Ellspermann, really great guy. I've had the pleasure to get to know him years ago. You guys, I've been to your website. I'm really impressed. I really like the video that you have put up is explaining what the clerk does. Can you kind of go through that? Because I know a lot of people have no clue. What does a clerk of the court do?
Well, you're absolutely correct. David Ellspermann is a great guy, former police officer like you and I,
yep,
and a great public servant. And he and I have worked on several committees with the Florida Association of Court Clerks. What we do is manage the court system in behalf of the court system. We take care of the records. We take care of scheduling. We handle public documents. We handle official documents. We handle all payments that come through the court system in reference to fines, fees, and forfeitures. We handle child support. The Florida legislature did a study on clerks several years ago. one of their committees and found out that we did a little over 1,000 tasks in behalf of the counties and state government.
So you're busy.
So we stay pretty busy, yeah.
And you've got, of course, criminal, and you've got civil, and I mean, you've got all the various different divisions.
Right.
And you've also done something unique. There are 67 clerks. Am I correct? Yeah, one per county. You computerized quite early before everybody else, didn't you?
Right, that's correct. What we did in Clay County was I realized that in order to cut staff and save taxpayers money, we had to begin a process of updating and upgrading our systems, our information systems. So we've been very proactive in that. We became the first county to be completely paperless within our civil court section. And we were kind of modeled after Manatee County and some of the other counties. And David Ellsperman, quite honestly, is doing the same thing here, moving forward. So we have now less employees, and we have more judicial staff, judges, and judicial administrators today in Clay County. But yet we have less staff today than when I took office in 1998.
So being a little forward thinking has turned out to be a windfall for the taxpayers.
Oh, windfall for the taxpayers, not only from that perspective that we've been able to economize and cut back staff, but we've returned over $9 million in the last 7 years to both Clay County and to the taxpayers of Florida.
That's impressive, and I I'm not going to make any excuse me, any bones about it. I mean, that's impressive. It's just the way it is. Now, you decided to run for Congress. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
What prompted that? I mean, look, I'll be real blunt with you. You've got it made as a clerk of the court. I mean, unless there's some outrageous scandal, you've done the job. You're returning money. Why would you run for Congress? I mean, well,
that's good. That's a good question. I mean, being clerk of court is both rewarding and it's a great job. I mean, it's a great position as a public servant. But at this time in my life, with things that have happened in my life, it's very conducive for me to move forward. I mean, I lost my wife 3 years ago to cancer.
Sorry about that.
I appreciate that. My children are all grown. I have a daughter that works for the Clay County Sheriff's Office in communications. I have a son that is a United States Secret Service agent, actually guarding Mitt Romney now on a protection team. And I have a third son that's graduating a couple months from now from the University of Central Florida and going into the military.
We have two sons. We have a daughter as well. Oh. Ours are younger. I always have to say I'm a little bit older parent. I've lost my mother, my father, my sister. Years ago, my wife had cancer very, very seriously. And I understand it's a come to Jesus moment in your life and all that.
Absolutely. It was an experience that you never get over.
No, you have to just...
Yep, have to move on.
You have to move on.
When you lose the love of your life.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So you've got a great family. I mean, it's a storybook family. Everybody's doing well, and you've decided to take the next step. Then was there a burning moment where you just simply said, like the old movie, I'm mad as heck, I'm not taking it anymore? What caused that?
No, actually, everything is very good in my life. I'm a man of faith. That comes first. I support my family, comes second, and then my job is third. And it's just the proper timing. And what happened was, when the state maps come out, the Senate maps for the congressional districts in October, November, the district is very conducive to Clay County, a Republican county, very conducive for someone from Clay County winning. And I just feel like I could make a difference in Congress, and I feel like Congress needs people who will be willing to stand up for what is right and not be a part of what is wrong. I was approached by some business people in Clay County to run. One of them was Jim Horn, who is a very successful businessman, and others, and said, look at the map and decide if this is something you want to do, then we would support you. And as a result of that meeting and the fact that Cliff Stearns sent a message through Jim Horn, which he at several meetings, public meetings, stated that Congressman Cliff Stearns wanted to support somebody from Clay County, and his congressional aide at a Republican meeting in Clay County on third Wednesday of January stood up and stated this, and I'll quote this. And this is kind of the defining moment in when I made my decision up. She said, a lady named Sherry Porter, his congressional aide, said this: Said Congressman Stearns wants somebody from Clay County to run because Clay County has been so good to Congressman Stearns. He does not want somebody who will move into Clay County. He wants somebody from Clay County. So based on his contact with Jim Horn, who by the way is a friend of mine.
Well, yeah. Let's slow down a second.
Okay.
Jim Horn. Who is Jim Horn?
Okay. He is a very successful business leader, a former state senator and president of the Florida Senate,
Okay,
and the first commissioner of education for the state of Florida.
Okay, so Jim Horn is, and you've been a lifelong Republican.
No, I started out as a Democrat.
Many years ago.
Many years ago.
Many
25 plus.
Where, to be blunt, almost every Republican in office in this state
had to be a Democrat.
Had to be a Democrat. Okay, so that's an important issue here. It's not an issue, just a distinction that people didn't understand. Horn, businessman, has done well for himself, etc. Well established in the Clay County area, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
United State Senator, President of the Florida State Senate,
right?
Correct.
Right.
And then becomes our first Secretary of Agriculture. Is that correct?
Commissioner of Education.
I'm sorry. I've done that 5 times. I can't get it out of my head for some reason. I got Putnam on my head. Commissioner of Education. Okay. Right. Now he's out of office.
That's correct.
And is he not? He's a lobbyist, or is he an official lobbyist, or is he an unofficial lobbyist at times?
He's a lobbyist, part of the Horn Group, and he's actually the lobbyist for the Clay County Clerk's Office, and has been so since 2009. And he's an employee of mine. And
you need to hire a lobbyist as a clerk of the court, because you can't just drop what you're doing. You've got to have somebody monitoring, I'm assuming, the legislation, and there's been a lot of changes. All the clerks across the state of Florida with the budget cuts, et cetera. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
Somebody's got to look out for your interests.
Absolutely. And he works not only for me, but he actually works with the FACC, Florida Association of Court Clerks, lobbyists on legislative matters. They work together. I just happened to hire him at the request of some of the other clerks to get him on board because of primarily his relationship with senators. Okay.
Now, your county is growing. I mean, it has grown by leaps and bounds, correct?
That's correct.
Jacksonville, very similar to what Marion County, and just we grew massive. So there's a lot of similarities between Marion and Alachua County. Would that be, Marion and Clay County. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, that's fair, yes.
Okay. Horn is also, well, let's just say up until very recently, a personal friend as well. I mean, you know him. I mean, is a, like you and I now know each other, we would be able to say how you do. I mean, but you work with this fellow, right?
Yeah, for years.
Okay, so let's not. When you decided that the various political forces in the state of Florida, Stearns was going to run for re-election in, I believe, the 11th, right?
That's correct.
And you're running for District
3,
which is a new district. And just so everybody knows, in the state of Florida, and the U.S. Census was actually created by Congress. If we go back to our actual Constitution, you go back to the Miracle in Philadelphia, what happened is they created a census so that we would have reapportionment every 10 years. So every 10 years, we sit down, we have to redraw the lines and make sure that we basically have one man, one vote. And as time has gone on, as you know, blacks could not vote, women could not vote. We've become a more civilized nation, and so everybody has to have their vote counted. We're going through that process right now. It's done for the Congress. It's done for the State House. The State Senate, our Supreme Court, as we're recording this right now, they've got a little bit of problem with a couple of the districts, I believe 5. But if you look, it's really spot on. And one of the items in the state of Florida, we had a group called Fair Districts. And Fair Districts has really been on the bandwagon to eliminate gerrymandering. And one of the districts that has always been gerrymandered to ensure that a black lady is always voted in is Corrine Brown, correct?
Absolutely correct.
It is
on target.
And that district runs from, good Lord, from Jacksonville and Wiggles and Waggles all the way around. I think some areas it's about a block or 2 wide, and it goes down into the Orlando area. And you have to understand, I can appreciate that, but gerrymandering is something that Fair Districts fought against. And so a lot of the districts, now your district now, number 3, how many counties do you touch altogether?
All are part of 13.
13, but it's more compact than, even though there's 13, it's
contiguous.
Yeah, it's not Corine's district. Let's just say that.
Not.
Okay, so there was a real effort to try to make these things make sense. Fair enough.
Right.
So you are going to run for Congress. This is 2012. And just so you all understand, 2010, census, they figure out the data, it's 11, and then you have all this political posturing, and it's a political process.
Correct.
That takes place in the state house, not the federal government, not in the courthouse, but the state in the legislative session, and they figured it out, which means Stearns was going to run for his seat again, right? In number 11, which the new reforms 11. Now, what does 11 look like? Kinda.
It's probably 75 to 80% of Marion County, and then goes south. And Congressman Nugent is now living within this district, as well as Congressman Stearns' house is within this district.
And if I'm not mistaken, Nugent, you basically have got Citrus, not all, but parts of Citrus and Hernando, and the villages are a big section of that, correct? Big section of that. Okay. So Stearns lives in 11. The new district is coming up. There's a gentleman up in Alachua County who's announced, and you live in Clay County, which Clay County, if I'm not mistaken, and you've got to help me on this because I'm not really good on all these things, Clay County is pretty heavily Republican, is it not?
Yeah. We changed in 1988, during the Reagan years, from a completely Democratic county almost overnight to a complete Republican county, and there are no elected Democratic elected representatives in Clay County now.
Okay, that's interesting. Your Republicans in Clay County would not kowtow to the idea that you have to have a few Democratic officers.
Absolutely not.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely not. They are very, very conservative and very, very Republican. We have a little bit over 70,000 Republicans as opposed to 30-something thousand plus Democrats.
So from a demographic standpoint, Stearns wanted, and others, wanted to have a strong candidate, very well known, established, etc. Am I kind of going from Clay County, because you've got to win Clay County to get this new district. Okay, so it's numbers.
Exactly.
And in all full disclosure, I'm a financial analyst. I'm an economist, and I'm really good with math. So and I've got a son who's even better than me at that. So it's numbers. I mean, everything in life is numbers, and you have to the way it works out. Okay, so would it be fair to say that some folks in the Republican Party were, hey, Jim, come on, I mean, you got a great name, you got a great history, you've done, you won't tolerate bribery and nonsense and BS. You got an efficient clerk's office. Is this people like you?
It's a proper time in life.
It's a good time in life. You're 59, right?
59, that's correct.
And you don't need this.
No.
So yeah, go for it.
Go for it. That was the encouragement. And when Jim Horn told me that Cliff Stearns was not going to run and was going to support me, that kind of made the mind up. It's the best of both worlds.
So Jim Horn, let's go back to Jim. Now, he's a pretty powerful guy in the state.
Oh, he's very powerful in Clay County and very powerful in the state of Florida.
And you guys are close.
And we have been friends for years.
And you asked him to assist you in your campaign.
He actually volunteered. He came to me and said, we can win this. We were sitting at a restaurant in Orange Park or in Fleming Island. He said, we can win this. You can win this. And I would volunteer to be your campaign finance chairman. And he said, so I will coordinate all your finances if you will consider running.
Okay. What happens?
Well, a couple of weeks after I withdraw from re-election, because I'd filed to run for the clerk of court again in Clay County, even though I really didn't have the burning desire, but because my employees had approached me and the public had approached me again to run, I had filed my papers to run. So based on those comments, I said, well, okay. So I withdrew my candidacy as clerk of court, filed my papers to run for Congress, and about 2 weeks later, I received a call from Sherry Porter, the congressional aide to Cliff Stearns.
Okay, so I've written down a little thing here. Sherry, I started off with a C, but I'm sure it's Sherry with an S, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was mine. So Sherry Porter now calls you.
That's correct.
And Jim Horn, again, is pretty significant political figure, and we've really cleanly gone through all that. Now what happens?
Sherry Porter tells me over the phone that Congressman Stearns had asked her to call me and advise me that he was now considering running in this new district because it was 60% of the voters still were voters he had served in the past. So she essentially said he was going to run in this district. And so I told her, I said, well, that's fine because I am not getting out. I still believe that I could carry Clay County. The demographics show that if somebody carries Clay County, they have a good chance of winning. I have support of clerks and the clerks of courts in almost every other county within the district. I have several sheriffs and other constitutional officers that had already signed up with me that were willing to help me. So I told her simply, I'm not getting out.
Okay, let me stop you. Obviously, because of the nature of what you do, you would have a relationship with the other constitutional officers in Clay County.
Right.
Naturally, because of the nature of the work that you would do, you would have a relationship, an acquaintance with other clerks of the court, especially counties that abut up to Clay County, correct?
I'm very
And you the clerks of the court, you guys have an association, you get together because you're all facing the same issues, right?
Exactly.
There's a technology change. I mean, all of us who are now using iPads and iPhones, you're dealing with that just on a more massive scale.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm saying this, it appears that you've been on the vanguard of making changes. Right. And you've done okay.
Yeah, we've been very, very progressive. I was appointed by the Florida Supreme Court to be on the technology committee for the state of Florida. I was appointed by the Florida Association of Court Clerks to be part of the e-portal committee, which is moving all clerks in the direction of e-filing and paperless courts.
Isn't it funny how some of us have started off as old flatfoot beat cops actually know what we're doing, and we move up in life, don't we?
Listen, if I had it to do over again, I would still be a flatfoot
beat cop. It was fun, isn't it?
It was the best.
You know, it's for both of us. It's been many, many, many years, but you just never get it out of you, do you?
Never get it out of your system, no.
Yeah, if you haven't done it, you just don't know. You just can't appreciate it. Okay. So you're naturally going to talk to these people, and you're going to say, I'm thinking about running. What do you think? I mean, you obviously spent some time doing this. I mean, that would make sense, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And Stearns is definitely going to run for his old seat. He lives in the 11th, yada, yada, yada. I mean, that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you get a call from Sherry Porter informing you that Cliff is starting to vacillate, right? Now, his district, if I'm not mistaken, used to run basically from Jacksonville. In fact, doesn't he have a multi-million-dollar home in, I believe it's in St. Augustine. He's got like a $4 or $5 million home that very few people know about. He really doesn't live in Marion County anymore. He's got this gorgeous thing on the water. His district kind of meanders around and kind of followed Corrine Brown's district, didn't it? Yeah, it kind of like paralleled a snake down all the way into the villages, and I mean, just kind of gobbled all the Republican areas.
Yeah, he sure did.
Is that fair?
He sure did, yes.
And so now with fair districts and that they've kind of crunched them down, even though it's 13 counties, now Clay County, the third, which is what you're going to be running for, it's more compact, and now Clay County is the big dog on the licking log, right? I mean, and Stearns knows it.
And Stearns knows that, yes.
Okay. So he's going to run for 11, and the Villages is the big dog in the 11th, right? Would that be fair to say?
Fair to say.
I mean, there's other areas, but that's going to be the big vote block down there.
Oh, yes.
You're the big vote block up there. And Rick Nugent, the sheriff from Hernando County that got into office a couple of years ago, correct, he and Stearns are going to have to fight it out, right?
They're going to have to fight it out if he stays here, yes.
Now, it has been said, I don't want you to comment, it has been said that Nugent is much more close to the Morris development in the Villages than Stearns. There's some bad feelings there somewhere along the line. So they're going to heavily support Nugent, which one could assume Stearns decides for self-preservation purposes, even though he's been in Congress, I think 26, 28 years, whatever it's been, he's now going to hop into your district.
Yeah. He wants to continue in Congress after 24 years.
Is it 24?
24.
Okay, so now let's pick it up. We've got Horn, we've got Porter. Now what happens?
Well, I called Cliff Stearns.
You called him directly?
Called him directly. Got him. Horn had given me his private cell number.
I've done that too, you know.
Have you? Okay. So I talked with him, and I asked him. I said, Congressman, your Sherry Porter called me, which I felt was interesting. I felt like he should have called me since I got in this race because of him. But nevertheless, I called him and I said,
Well, wait a minute. He encouraged you to run.
through a third party, yes.
It's always through a third party.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I called him, I talked to him, and said, Congressman, I understand you're considering running and establishing an address somewhere within this district. I had heard in Clay County, and that you're considering running for this District 3. And he said that he felt like Clay County had supported him, and he wanted me to consider re-entering the race for Clerk of Courts in Clay County, and he would support me. And I told him at that point in time, I said, no, I'm not. I said, you put me in the race. You're not getting me out.
Okay, so this is a case of buyer's remorse on his part.
Obviously. He knew that he did not have a base of support without taking Clay County.
Am I to assume that the district lines were not firmed up until recently, and then once they got firmed up, he realized, I got a problem? I mean, is that the timing of this? I mean, we don't know in his mind. Well, he's not here to defend himself, and I know he'll never come on our show. You're invited, Cliff. I'll be more than happy to interview. But is the timing, is that?
Yeah, that's what happened. The Senate map came out, and they had one map, one congressional map.
Right.
The House came out, and they had 7 maps. But of those 7 maps, 5 of them had District 3 almost exactly like it is now. And so
he rolled the dice, and the dice didn't go his way.
Well, I called Senator Thrasher and actually talked to him the 1st of January, and he said he thought District 3, Senator Thrasher, was a big proponent of redistricting and had some horsepower in Tallahassee for the redistricting process. And so he told me that to rest assured that District 3 would remain almost like it was. And I'm sure he told Cliff Stearns the same thing.
Okay, so let's talk about Thrasher now. Who is Thrasher? Okay. Remember, we, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, want to know what we're doing is I want you to understand, because a lot of you, I don't want you just voting based upon slogans or just, a knee-jerk reaction. Let's understand, this is an opportunity to really understand history, current historical issues, and we got a man here who's standing up. Who's Thrasher?
All of these are power figures, both in Clay County and on the state level. So
it would not make sense for me, little tiny Paul Truesdell, to go and take on Mr. Horn or Mr. Thrasher or Mr. Stearns. That's bad politics, right?
Well, you probably could, but the normal citizen, no.
Anybody knows me knows I would.
You probably would.
There's a windmill, Don. Go get it. Okay, get Paul to do it.
No, he is very powerful, very influential. We have a center named after called the Thrasher Horn Center because John Thrasher is a former Speaker of the House. Horn is a former President of the Senate, and John Thrasher is now in leadership position within the Florida Senate today.
Woo!
So these are movers and shakers.
And again, as we're going through this progression, these are people that you obviously, because it's Clay, you guys know each other. You're friends. You work together. It's not an acrimonious relationship. I mean, you get along.
We get along. That's about as strong as you can say it. Politically, we have differed in many elections, both Thrasher and Horn and I.
Sure.
But we get along. And we usually get along, too, because we were all focused on Clay County. As a representative there, we get along to help Clay County. Okay.
I think it's a real important distinction. You have been able to get along with people without crossing the line of being one of the good old boys. Would that be a fair statement?
That is a very fair statement.
Okay. And let's talk about that for a second. You and I had a chance to chat a little bit before we began this broadcast. And I talked a little bit about in every community, you have to be foolish not to understand there's a tendency for people to begin, like kinds tend to gather together. But you can cross that line, and everybody knows what a good old boy network is, right? I mean, we know that stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
I've been approached years ago. You've been approached. You learn to say no, don't you?
Exactly.
And you've had that same situation.
I've had the same situation where I've had to say no, yes.
And that's where you would buck heads with some of these guys.
That's where I would buck heads, yes.
There's a morals, there's an ethics. You got to do what's right for the community because you're not elected in a star chamber. You're elected by we the people. Fair enough?
Fair enough. A guy told me one time when I was on the county commission, I was about to vote for an issue that was politically would help me, but ethically would not be right. And he told me, he says, here's this, and I've always used this since then. He said, either you be a part of what is right or you become a part of what is wrong.
Oh, that's good.
And so I've used that kind of statement throughout my life when I voted on stuff. And I said on several issues in Clay County, I made this statement, which kind of sets me apart from other elected officials. On a zoning issue involving something that challenged me in my faith, I told the audience, which was a packed courthouse, county commission room, I said, I have always tried to support my constituents. I have always tried to vote how you would have me vote, and I will continue to do so unless it involves an issue that challenges my faith. At that point in time, and only that time, do I answer to a higher authority. And that's kind of how we've been, and that's put me in crosshairs with some of these people because on Sunday sales of alcoholic beverages, extending sales, on extending gambling or implementing gambling, legalized gambling within our county, I've always stood firm and said that is not what family values stand for, and I'm not going to vote for those and support those.
I'm impressed. Okay, so now let's go back. Now Thrasher, we left off with Thrasher.
Okay.
Horn's a friend. He's going to help you on your campaign. Stearns is going to stay in his district in 11. Maps come out. Oops, I got a problem. Gamesmanship, Nugent, the villages, etc. He's been called a carpetbagger by another congressional candidate, Don Browning. Boom, he now reneges on his support to you through others. He's now informing you, I'm running. And one of those is Sherry Porter, and now John Thrasher comes in. What does Thrasher do to you again?
Well, Thrasher didn't. I only talked to him
I don't
one
mean
time.
didn't do to you, but how does he now play in?
Well, not at all, directly. Okay. I mean, he's good friends with Jim Horn and all the players in what we're about to talk about.
Okay.
But directly, I never talked to John Thrasher again. And because when I talked to Cliff Stearns directly by telephone while in Washington, he told me that he was considering running and he was going to move over here to Clay County or into this district. And so firsthand knowledge, he told me he was running.
Okay, pick it up.
All right, from that point, things began to unravel within my congressional campaign.
Surprise.
I began to try to contact my finance chairman, Jim Horn, and could not get return phone calls for almost 3 weeks. So on February the 16th, I texted him and I said this. I said, why, Jim, why do I get the feeling that you're avoiding me? Either call me as a friend, call me as my campaign finance chairman, or call me as my employee, but I want to call.
Now, this is February the 16th.
February the 16th.
When did the call take place with Cliff Stearns?
Probably the last week of January.
And when did he announce that he was going to run in the 3rd?
Well, Sherry Porter kind of announced it, began to announce it at some of the Republican functions there around the 4th week of January, around when that phone call occurred.
What type of Republican functions?
Republican Executive Committee meetings, Republican Men's Club meetings. She began to do what Cliff had told her to do, which was to let folks know. Because once she called me and told me, I believe, was on like a Tuesday or Wednesday that he was considering. It wasn't but either the next day or at the latest 2 days later when I called him.
Okay, so just so everybody understands, just let me give you a little background here. The Republican Party of the state of Florida, there is actually no such thing as a Republican Party in the nation. The Republican National Committee is made up of 50 states. You also have the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and others. It's a committee. Actual political parties all take place on a state level. That's very important for you to understand. In each state, states' rights, they create their own type of political party organization. And in the state of Florida, we have the Division of Elections, etc., all these laws, which were recently changed. And one of the items the Republican Party, as well as the Democratic Party, has is they have what are called executive committees. And these executive committees exist on a county level. So you would have one, for example, in Clay County, Alachua County, Marion County. And that's where your hardcore, rabid Republicans that are really into the political posturing, they're trying to become state committee men and committee women, the chairman. I mean, that's where that internal politics takes place. They are also where your delegates to your conventions take place. You have to have that type of an apparatus. Now, from there, if you are an ambassador for a member of Congress or others, that's where you go to begin to get the word out. And then you have your ancillary organizations, the Republican Women's Club, the Republican Men's Club. You have these different, there are some pachyderms out there, different organizations then that would come in and supplement not only the state, but the local committees. And that's where Sherry now is making her rounds, not probably just in Clay County, but other places to let softening up the announcement that he's going to now run in the 3rd, correct?
Not only that, but Sherry Porter is actually president of the Clay County Republican Women's Club.
Oh, really?
So she is actually making contacts all throughout.
So she's being paid. She's on the payroll for Cliff Stearns.
Cliff Stearns.
And she's also
the volunteer head of the elected head of the Republican Women's Club.
Ooh, you're down between a
I'm
rock and a hard place. Yeah.
I'm in a spot. So and during that 3-week period when Sherry Porter called me, and I talked to Cliff Stearns, and I text Jim Horn on February the 16th, I am calling him and texting him and saying, Jim, I'm not getting out. I'm running. I want to make sure you're still on board as my finance chairman. And I just would not receive any response. And so, you've been around politics, and I've been around.
Oh, yeah.
I knew what was coming.
We've all been around the block. We know what.
I could tell what was about to happen to me.
It's a big curveball coming in.
Oh, yes, they're surrounding the wagons.
It's not a fastball. This is real looping in, yeah.
Yeah. So on the 16th, I texted him. He called me back immediately. And he actually texted me back and said, Jim, I've been real busy in the legislature. This weekend is my anniversary. I'll be home Friday. I will call you sometime tomorrow.
And in all fairness, we just wrapped up the legislative session. We're going to be going back into special session, but that would be fair. I mean, that's
I texted him back.
Totally plausible.
Oh, I texted him back.
It's also the time when everybody's got an opportunity to be chatting with everybody.
Chatting with everybody.
There you go.
I knew he was extremely busy. I said, Jim, I apologize. Just call me when you get a chance. Call me next week sometime when things settle down. And so that's kind of because I understood that the possibility existed. He was extremely busy because he's a very popular lobbyist over there.
Okay, so now what happens?
So
the seeds are being sown, and
so and I'm realizing that support for my candidacy is beginning to fade away because these guys that are supporting me, that are a core of my financial committee, are also very, very close friends to Cliff Stearns.
Okay, now let me pause you for a quick second. Grab a cup of coffee. I'm going to ask you a question that I'm going to blindside you. There's another gentleman that's running for office besides Cliff Stearns. And if I'm not mistaken, if I recall from following this, as soon as it began to leak out that he was going to change, this guy lost his mind. Oh, he's been in the paper screaming foul all day long, right?
Oh, because they did it to him. They had promised him, I believe, now I haven't talked to him, but it indicates that the senator was going to be in a race with me, which is great, and not Cliff Stearns. And
okay,
he was surprised just like I was.
Let's just call it former sheriff
yes.
of Alachua County, fellow by name of Steve Ulrich.
Right, that's correct.
And he chose to run for the state senate. He won that seat. There was a gentleman by the name of Travis Horn. I believe he ran against him for the Republican nomination a few years ago. And Steve handily won, correct? Because it's kind of a Republican area?
It is.
Okay. So you've got the two big Republican areas and the two big dogs, yourself and Mr. Ulrich. For all practical purposes, that's a fair race. Let the chips fall where they may, to discuss the issues, etc. Is that fair enough?
Jim Horn's exact words when we knew we were going to be running, Steve Ulrich says, "Let the games begin," because we knew we could beat him.
Yeah,
we felt we could.
Well, but on a fair basis. I mean, it's a campaign.
It's a campaign. That's exactly true.
I mean, you weren't going to. Would you ever think of going to Steve Ulrich and saying, let's cut a deal and you get this and I do that?
No.
I mean, that would never cross your mind.
I enjoy campaigning.
Yeah.
I think it's the American process. It's the democratic process. And so I was gearing up to run Steve Ulrich.
Okay, so what I recall, and again, remember, I've got a lot of irons in the fire, but as I recall, he's the one that actually started off by going bananas.
Oh, he went crazy.
Okay. And he's quoted in the papers.
And justifiably so.
Okay, now I'm going to tell you straight up. We haven't talked about, I remember going, well, who's this guy Jett? I mean, doesn't he have a comment on this? I mean, you didn't say anything about this, right?
Well, that wasn't my battle. That wasn't my battle. I
So
mean, he was attacking him on where he lived. And, you know, I was just sitting back waiting for my turn because at that point in time, I did not know, even though in my heart I felt like I was being deserted, I did not know that they had totally deserted me until February the 17th.
see, I got the impression, I'll tell you straight up, I got the impression that Ulrich was the heir apparent in this district, and that when Stearns flipped in, it was like, you lied to me, this is horrible. You know, I was actually, I mean, the impression I got, it was as if we had cut a deal and you reneged on it, and I can't believe you're coming in.
That could very well be. And he may not have even known that I was
I'm not
going to
saying he
run.
did that. I'm not
Right.
saying it just.
But he was
That's the
definitely-
impression that was given.
He had made it widely known that for several months that he was considering running for Congress. That's correct.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so let's pick it up. Now what happens? Does Horn finally get a hold of you?
Yeah, Horn
Okay.
called me on Friday, February 17th, and the conversation began something like this. And he said, Jim says, he said, I'm still with you. He said, but it's going to be a tough race. He said, with Cliff Stearns in this district, I'm not going to be able to raise you very much money. He said, everybody is going to endorse Cliff Stearns. I said, everybody, who? He said, John Thrasher. He said, Lieutenant Governor Jennifer Carroll, Lynn Curry, with the chairman of the Florida Republican Party. And those are the three names he mentioned. He said, everybody of any substance in Clay County in this area is going to endorse Cliff Stearns. And I said, Jim, I really don't care, because I have got commitments from local constitutional officers and constitutional officers throughout this district that are going to endorse me. And I would much rather have those people than the ones you've mentioned. And he says, well, at that point he kind of hesitated. And I said, I'm not getting out, Jim. I'm going to run. I'm just not getting out. He said, well, here's...
Wait a minute, I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
I have to. He did not tell you to drop out directly,
No, he did not. Not at that point.
but he was telling you that I've got to pull out because the big dog is going to run and we've got to support the big
The
dog.
money's not going to be there.
So they're going to cut you off.
They're going to dry up the money.
Okay. And in politics, money is important.
Absolutely.
13 counties.
Unfortunately, it is, yes. The money is important, yes.
Okay.
13 counties.
What before you continue, what are you thinking in this call? I mean,
Well,
I don't think a lot of people. Maybe I'm different. I like to know the emotions. Because I would be just. I mean, my heart would be down on my toes. I'd be just like, I'd be flabbergasted. Of course, you're a big boy. You've been around the blocks, but did that just like catch you completely off guard?
no, not because
You kind of knew,
I knew what was coming. But I mean, when somebody doesn't call you back for 3 weeks.
but at least he had the
kinda
guts to tell you. So he's telling you.
So he's telling me right
Okay,
up
so
front.
let's keep on going. So now what happens?
Now he makes an interesting statement which begins the process for which we're about to get into. He says, Jimmy, he said, you need to see the whole picture. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the Speaker of the House is coming to Clay County, to Orange Park, to the home of Judge Sapp, who is a local businessman, very successful, very well respected guy that lives in Orange Park, Florida. He's coming to his house on March the 2nd, and the Speaker wants to meet privately with you. And I said, why would the Speaker of the United States Congress want to meet with little old Jimmy Jett running for Congress in District 3 in Florida? He said, because he wants to make you an offer to get out of the race and support Cliff Stearns.
Oh boy, now we got to stop. Hold the horses here. We got to go through this. Who are we talking about again?
We're talking about the Speaker of Congress,
And you're on the phone with who again?
with Jim Horn.
Okay. So Jim Horn, who is the former Secretary of Education,
Correct.
Speaker of the Florida House.
A former President of the Senate.
I do that already. Senate.
My campaign finance chairman, my friend, my employee is telling me this.
Porter has laid the seeds. Is an employee of Stearns that he's going to switch. Cliff Stearns has been in office 24 years. Ran originally on term limits.
8 is enough.
8 is enough. Okay. We've got John Thrasher now involved in this mix.
Indirectly. He
Indirectly.
only talked to me that one time.
But he's just laying
Right. Behind the scenes, possibly.
letting you know what the lay of the land is.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. We've got Curry, who is the head of the Republican Party now.
Right.
His name has now come up.
His name has come up as endorsing Cliff Stearns, yes.
Our Lieutenant Governor,
Correct.
Lieutenant Governor Carroll, her name has now come up. Sapp, a local boy in the political area and business area of Clay County, he's come up, and his home is going to be used for an event coming up as well, correct?
A fundraiser for the Republican Party of America.
And now we have John Boehner, the third most powerful person in the United States, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. If something happens to the president and the vice president, he is the next president of the United States.
You can't make this up. You can't make it up. Now, let me make clear as we go through this, I never personally spoke with the Lieutenant Governor, and I've never spoken with Lynn Curry, never met him.
But they're dropping these bombs
they're
on you.
throwing these names out. So now whether those endorsements were going to be true or not, I don't know at this point in time, and they may not have ever been true, but they're throwing the names out there, and I think with John Boehner's name in there, it begins to got to have a lot of substance to it.
Okay, brother, this is going to be good. Okay, now what happens?
All right, I tell him, I said, well, I would be more than happy to meet with the Speaker, Jim, but I'm not getting out of this race, and I'm not taking an offer. And so, but on March 2nd, I would be more than happy to meet with Speaker Boehner, because I'm looking forward to working with him in January.
Sure, absolutely.
And so the conversation kind of ends with that. He said somebody from his staff will be calling you within the next 2 weeks to arrange that appointment. Now, this was before they had made any announcements about a fundraiser for John Boehner and the Republican Party coming anywhere in Clay County. Nobody knew it.
Right.
So,
okay.
So that was kind of the end of that conversation.
And a lot of, I think, and to be fair, I mean, a lot of those high-end fundraisers are not necessarily, you know who can and can't give, and obviously rank and file Republicans. A lot of you folks don't realize this. You're not invited because you're not writing the big checks.
Yeah, or if you're influential, you're invited, but you don't have to write a check.
Yeah.
You're kind of exempted out.
Centers of influence.
That's right. Either way, you're gonna contribute one of the other, either monetarily or
it's money and votes, right? It's all money and votes.
That's right.
Okay. What happens next?
Well, now I've gotten the message. I know that that the big dogs are not supporting me. The influential and financially secure individuals are pulling back. That Cliff Stearns does not want me to run in Clay County, and so I'm committed to continue. I get a call on Tuesday. That was on Friday, February the 17th. The following Tuesday, interestingly enough, I get a call. Oh, and by the way, let me go back. When Jim Horn called me on February the 17th, I was in my office. He called me on my personal cell phone, and I had my brother, who was a lieutenant with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, sitting in front of my desk, as well as my director of my traffic division for the court system. They heard this conversation.
Okay. We have read in the paper, and Stearns is using things like the Hatch Act or his people speaking for him, that one of the problems they have is that you took a phone call while you're in your office, right?
Well, I'm the elected clerk of courts.
Okay.
I have a right to be there.
So, but they've made us think about that.
Well, they're alleging that was improper, which it absolutely was not.
But they called you.
They call me, and they call me on my personal cell phone that I pay for.
And you don't give that number out.
I don't. Well, I do give it out to constituents. Yes, I do.
Okay.
And Jim Horn certainly has it.
Okay, fair enough. My mistake. Yeah. So you're in your office. Your brother's there. You've got a head of your traffic division. Call comes in. What happens?
Well, when he mentions John Boehner's name,
you perk right up.
I perk right up, and I say John Boehner, and they hear it, and so they perk up. And so that's we ended the conversation with the fact that, Jim, I'll be more than happy to meet with him, but I'm not getting out.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, I receive another very interesting call while in my office at the courthouse on my private cell phone. And this one is from Pete Sessions, Congressman Pete Sessions of Texas.
Holy cow.
So, and he, if you do know, not only does he represent Texas, but he is the chairman of the Republican National Congressional Committee. They are the ones that endorse local Republicans for Congress throughout the nation. They are the money people. They decide who to commit monies to in congressional campaigns. And so he calls me. Very pleasant guy, very pleasant conversation, no offers, but the message was clear.
You're not right. You need to get out.
Well, he didn't say he wouldn't say that. As a matter of fact, he said, "I'm not trying to talk you into getting out, but you need to know where the congressional committee is going to be, the RNCC, where I am, and where the Speaker Boehner is. We're all in Cliff Stearns' camp."
Okay, let's take a quick pause here. I want to review this. We've got Horn and Thrasher. We've got Stearns, Porter. We've had names dropped with Curry and Lieutenant Governor Carroll. We've got politically powerful people who are in private industry, whose home is now going to be used for a fundraiser where the third most powerful person, we could say, in the world, John Boehner, will be attending, raising money. And now we have Congressman Sessions, correct?
Correct.
From Texas, who is calling you on your phone.
Correct.
To just politely tell you that we're not really thrilled that you're running. And do not expect any help from us in any way, shape, or form. It sounds to me like a good old boy network that you didn't even realize existed on a playing field that you may not have never even realized exist. I mean, this is a big deal.
The message was clear. There's no doubt.
Is this what government is supposed to be? No, don't answer. I believe the Constitution says government is of and by the people. We the people. Do those things mean anything anymore? Should they mean anything? Or is this the way it is? I mean, are we out of touch with reality, or?
Well, we may be, but what is happening at that point in time is exactly why I was running for Congress. I mean, I believe that the Washington insiders who pick and choose who to run throughout this nation should no longer, that should not be. That should not be. We should be able to run as the Constitution says. If we want to run,
it's like a chess match.
It's like a chess match, and they want to choose this one because they can manipulate this person, and they want Cliff Stearns because Cliff Stearns is part of the good old boy circle. They can get him to walk lockstep with anybody up there. That's why I'm running for this position. It's got to stop. America has got to change if we're going to restore America. And so that's why I'm running, and that's why.
That really comes down to the crux of what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. And if I win, that's okay. And if I lose, that's okay. I mean, I'm okay with both of those. I would love to win. That's why I'm running, and I'm running to win. But that's why I'm placing myself forward, because I believe that running for Congress is not a job. It's a calling. It should be a call. Any position in public service, whether it's a police officer, firefighter, or elected official, should be a calling. And I believe biblically it says that.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go back to what you said. Now, I can't believe this. Pete Sessions calls you. He's the money guy for the House. I mean, politically.
Right.
And thank you. Continue to do what you're doing, but you're not going to get our support in any way, shape, or form.
No support. And we ended the conversation in a very pleasant manner, because I told him, I said, Congressman, I appreciate your call. I'm not getting out. I look forward to serving with you in January. Hung the phone up.
Okay, so you know what the score is. What's going to happen now? Now what happens?
Well, now it begins to escalate, because now I've received 2 calls, one from a close friend, one from a stranger. The stranger has said the power brokers in Washington are not going to be for me. So it can only begin to escalate, and I realize what's happening. So I begin to take meticulous notes and on anything that's occurring involving pressure to get me out of Congress.
And like a professional, I mean, we all,
an ex-police officer.
We all take notes.
We take notes. We know what's coming. I know what's coming. And so the next event was 2 days later. I was at a fundraiser for a Clay County person that's running for state representative.
Okay.
And the fundraiser was actually at Judge Sapp's house.
And it's important that's not a judge. It's Judd. Judd Sapp. SAPP.
And so we're at the fundraiser, and toward the end of the fundraiser.
Is this fellow Travis Cummings?
I
heard. Okay, yeah.
He's running. Nice guy, county commissioner right now in Clay County. I'm there to show my support for him as a Clay County person. And toward the end of the fundraiser, Judd comes up to me and says, on no uncertain terms, no embarrassment, says, Jim says, or Jimmy says, do you know what's going to be offered to you next Friday? Now, this was on a Thursday night, so 8 days later is when the meeting is supposed to occur between myself and Cliff Stearns and Speaker Boehner. And I said, Jim Horn just alluded to there's going to be an offer, but no one has been specific. And he said, let's step outside. So we stepped outside, and he said, here's what they're going to offer. He said, they will give you anything you want. And the exact term he used, sky is the limit. And I said, they who? He said, Cliff Stearns and Speaker Boehner. Now, again, do I believe Speaker Boehner's involved in this? I have no indication he ever was. I never met with him, never talked with him. But Cliff Stearns certainly was involved in this, because in every conversation, he was the driving force.
Okay, so in reality in life, what we've got going on here is Boehner has no skin in this game, other than the fact he wants to make sure it stays Republican.
Right.
So that could be questionable. But the guy who's got the skin in this game, who has everything to lose, is going to be Cliff Stearns.
That's a
so
great term.
So your keen police mind, a professional that you are, clerk of the court, we're all big boys. Okay, this makes this.
I know what he's about to say now.
Okay,
and the offer,
the sky's the limit.
Sky is the limit, and he says there's a couple of things they are willing to do. And I said, what? He said, well, if a Republican president gets elected, Cliff will get you appointed as the U.S. Marshal for the Southern District. And I said, my gosh, that's a pretty significant appointment. He said, well, Jim, if that doesn't work, they will give you or get you the appointment as the director of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, because they felt like the director of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement was going to retire within a year.
Okay, stop. I got to give context.
It is unbelievable.
I got to give context. When Barack Obama let me go back a little bit further. When President Bush took over after the election of 2000, the Democratic Party went bananas, as the Republican Party does as well. But the president tends to ask for the resignation of all of your marshals, and a lot of those. These are positions that are filled. They're not necessarily the most politically patronage jobs. You tend to appoint law enforcement background people. Former sheriff here in Marion County, Fiddlesticks, I just forgot his name. Served as U.S. Marshal. I just lost his name. Anyways, but you tend to have a background. I mean,
correct.
Right? I mean,
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you do.
I do.
Years ago, like me, but you do.
Right.
You don't forget that stuff. But the head of FDLE, okay, so let me continue what I was going to say. The Democrats scream when Republicans replace, the Republicans scream when the Democrats replace, and if you really know politics, you just know that it's just all hot air and blow. You know it's going to happen, and you dismiss it. Newspapers make a big deal out of it, but it is what it is, right? We'd like to think that everything is totally above board and the most qualified is elected, but that's not the case. But when it comes to FDLE is the equivalent of our FBI. Isn't that not right?
Of which I would not be qualified. Be the first to tell you. I've been out of law enforcement so long, I would not be qualified for that position.
Absolutely should not be a political position, correct?
It should not be.
Now, we elect sheriffs. And you worked in a sheriff's agency. I worked in a city agency. And we talked a little bit earlier about the politics that goes on no matter what. And politics and law enforcement really, truly don't belong. I mean, it's going to happen, but yuck, right? I mean, you
should have the best of the best for law enforcement agency heads. Absolutely.
Yeah, really important. They're considering putting you in, it would be a political hack appointment to the head of the equivalent of the FBI in the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
That's what the offer was, yes.
When, especially smaller agencies, when they need help, a major crime, who do they call?
They call FDLE.
And if they've got a big county or big agency, they have some cooperative agreements. But FDLE has the big labs. I mean, this is the Megillah of our state, right?
This is the FBI of Florida.
Wow.
So, and then,
what did you think about that?
Well,
I mean,
my first reaction was, number one, it's hard to believe. Number two, suspicion. And I told him, I said, well, Judd, the problem I have is not only one, I'm not getting out, but the concern I have is that I can't trust Cliff Stearns. He's already lied to me once
Sure.
to get me in the election, or in the campaign process. I said, why wouldn't he be lying to me now? And he says, we'll make sure we get a commitment from him on all of these agreements. And he said, we just want you to think about it. I'm not trying to talk, again, he said, I'm not trying to talk you into getting out of the race, but we want to make sure that the offers are there and you have time to think about them. So I said, okay. I said, I appreciate it. And I even asked him, looking in retrospect, it's kind of funny. I said, well, if I don't accept it, am I still invited to the fundraiser with the speaker? And he says, no, you're not. He said, we don't want you
Take your toys and get out of our sandbox.
We do not want you to embarrass the speaker by turning it down. And I said, oh, okay, I understand. And we ended the conversation there.
Sure.
So,
Oh, this is great. We need to get John Grisham to just write this stuff up. This is a book, a story.
Well, we'll get together. I've heard some of your life history. I think it would be a bestseller if we could put both of ours together.
We'll just parallel it,
Right.
how we came together. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now the offer has been made, and what do you do with? I mean, what you leave and go home.
I leave and go home. I know they've crossed.
You must have called somebody, your brother or somebody.
Well, I did. I called my brother and kind of told him about it.
You guys are pretty close, right?
We're very close, and he's working in my campaign. He's worked in all of my family's
Sure.
office. And he said, well, just sit back. He said, that's not the end of it. He said, you told him that you were not going to accept it. He said, they have time to make another offer. And so that was on a Thursday night. On Friday night around 7 o'clock, I'm calling my campaign consultant, and I'm telling him part of this, just so he's aware of it. And he says,
and who's your consultant now?
Matt Justice,
Okay.
with Reliant, Florida. And he lives in Keystone Heights in Clay County.
Okay.
Good Christian man. And he said, well, that's interesting because I just got off the phone with Lieutenant Governor Jennifer Carroll.
Oh,
Now,
Lord.
let me start this by saying I've never spoken with Jennifer Carroll
right.
about this issue. So I'm relaying just what he told me. And he says, his exact words were, she told me essentially what Jim Horn told you, that you need to really take a hard look at this. Nobody's going to support you, that you need to consider getting out, and so on. And I said, wow. So I said, well, we kind of laughed about it, hung the phone up. I didn't talk to her directly. And that was the whole of that conversation. But
now let's wait a minute. Let's do a rewind for a quick second. Now you need to help me on this, because Jennifer Carroll is unique in the state of Florida. Is that not correct? I mean, she's the first black as well as a female to be lieutenant governor, correct?
But
Is
that's true.
Okay, is that
That's
fair?
true. That's
Okay.
fair.
She was a member of the Florida House of Representatives. Is that
That's
correct?
fair. That's fair.
She's from the Clay County area, or
She is very close friends with Jim Horn and John Thrasher. Yes.
and wasn't she very, very close to Governor Jeb Bush?
Very close.
Okay.
Yes.
And in all full fair disclosure, I want to make it real clear. My wife and I used to be Republicans. We're not right now. I'm not going to get it. It's not important. It's not what we're here for. We're not Democratic either. But I'm trying to be this is as close to a real David Susskind type interview. I want to get the whole story out. This is you're like my Richard Nixon. Anyways, she was really involved in the George Bush campaigns. I remember she was on stage when Kelly and I don't know if you knew this, when President Bush came to Gainesville, my wife and I were next to, if you look at the photo of the Jackson, see, I didn't tell you this. If you go to the Jacksonville, is it Times Union? There's my pitch. There's my wife and Cliff Stearns right next to each other, and President Bush. I sat next to Laura Bush. We were on stage. We went to Gainesville. Went up to Jacksonville. Everywhere you went, Jennifer Carroll was very heavily involved in any of the Bush's campaigns. Would that be fair to say?
That's fair to say.
And she ran for Congress more than a couple times.
She ran at least one time that I know of against Corrine Brown.
Corrine Brown,
Yes.
who we talked about earlier, has got a gerrymandered district that used to kind of parallel. Basically, hers kind of went like this, and Stearns kind of went like that as well.
Right.
And those two seem to get along, don't they? In some,
I wouldn't have any firsthand knowledge of that.
they.
Oh, you're talking about Jennifer Carroll. I thought you were talking about Jennifer Carroll and Corrine Brown.
No, I don't mean. I mean
yes.
Cliff Stearns. Politics makes for strange bedfellows.
Well, the tone of her conversation with my political consultant would certainly lend credence to the fact that they do get along. Yes.
Okay, so but Corrine Brown and Stearns have had a history of helping one another, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
So they're like complete bookends.
Yes.
And then Carol has run previously against Corrine.
Right.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
It's unbelievable.
You need a playbook. That's the reason why we put this little card up. You need to have a playbook to follow this. Now, I'm going to encourage everybody who is watching this, watch it again. Draw the lines and connect the dots. I've told my children for years, it's not how much you know in life. It's not necessarily how much experience you have. It's the ability to connect the dots. It's that critical thinking that will help you all the time. Okay, so now let's go back to Carol.
Okay.
Lieutenant Governor has called your political advisor,
right,
and said, you're not going to get any support.
Right.
You need to get out.
Yep. Now, she denies that. She denies that, but, and she sent an email to that effect a couple of days ago and said, I never told him that. And my response back to her, well, that's what he communicated to me. And as a matter of fact, in her email, and I'll read this, it's kind of interesting, she denies saying that I should get out. She said that if you should run a hard race to win, and if you see that the numbers don't reflect a possibility to win, you should try to support the front runner. Well, you can't support the front runner without dropping out. I'm certainly not going to stand up on a stage and say, I'm running for Congress, but I don't want you to vote. Vote for Cliff Stearns. So in writing, she's kind of confirming what my political consultant told me that night. And the more interesting that, Paul, is the fact that she has no business interfering in my campaign. I have never contacted her. I have never spoken with her about my candidacy. She has no business calling my campaign consultant at this point in time, in the middle of all of these offers coming, and then communicating with him that I should get out.
And let's also understand, I just can't make this stuff. We have their phone records will exist as to who called who.
Oh, absolutely.
So if your political advisor is not telling the truth, it's going to be known.
It's going to be known.
Let me pause for a second. I want to come back to this. You know that Jim Greer in the Republican Party and Charlie Crist and the very same people that we're talking about, that's just a mess, isn't it?
Yes.
That's an embarrassment.
It's a disgrace to the Republican Party.
Which is having this national convention in Tampa.
Correct.
On top of that, Scott Rothstein is convicted Ponzi schemer, very heavily involved in the Republican Party. He played at both sides, and he's given depositions, and a lot of stuff is getting ready to hit the fan. Wouldn't you think people you wouldn't even come close to doing this kind of nonsense with all of this attention coming in on Florida?
I don't think this is their first rodeo. I think this is, I would hope that it's not commonplace, but I tend to believe now that it is commonplace, not just for the Republican Party, but for the Democratic Party. I think these guys were too arrogant, they were too cocky, and they were too sure of themselves.
And you're a good Republican.
Absolutely.
And so they figured you would just go right along.
They figured I had a price, and that they would meet that price at some point in time.
And they met a sheriff that ain't for sale.
Well,
in your case, a clerk of the court that's not for sale. And you've proved that before.
Completely unemployed.
And again, let's go back. When you were on the county commission, you had a guy try to bribe you $30,000. We talked about it. Yeah. You said no. So this shouldn't be any surprise.
Oh, not to them. They knew of that incident. I've got it on my Facebook. I have it on my jamesjettforcongress.com website. So it's not unknown to them that I have taken the position that I'm going to stand up for what's right, and I'm not for sale.
Okay, so we left off with Carol. We left off with the phone call coming into your campaign advisor. Now what?
That was on a Friday night. So next Tuesday night, I receive a call from Judge Sapp. And he says, Jimmy.
This is the man who, in his home, for the fundraiser for the fellow running for state rep, the first inclination, this is where it really started coming out, right? That's when the dam started to break.
He's obviously communicating directly with with Cliff Stearns.
And he's given money to Cliff
and
before.
Yes. Yeah, he's a big contributor and a big fundraiser for him.
Bundler and raiser. Okay,
Right.
so now he's called you on the phone.
He's called me on the phone. It's Tuesday night, and it's 3 days before the speaker is coming into town and is going to spend time at his house and that fundraiser. He had a reception there. And he says, Jimmy, he says, okay, here's the offers. And by the way, all of this stuff that I'm talking about, I've sworn to in an affidavit with the FBI, which I'll get into in a few minutes.
Would you be willing to make a copy of that available for us to put on?
I will leave a copy.
Okay,
of all this.
and well, we're going to do that as well. We'll make a photocopy. We'll get scans of this, and we'll put it up on our blog site. We'll put a special link. We're getting ready to redo our website and everything, anyways, and we're getting ready. There's a lot. This technology stuff is tough. That I'm learning all about iTunes and the audio.
You have a son who understands it.
Boy, thank God.
I have to rely on my IT people.
Yeah, I'm not paying. Well, I'm paying, but not the way.
Yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are.
But we're going to put this all up online. Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, you've
yes.
brought a lot of material.
Right.
So okay, so we left off with Sap. He's on the phone, and now the offer is?
The offer is this. And he offers 6 things because now it's escalated to a whole new level because he's very, very specific. And he says, Cliff is on board, and here are the offers. Number one, all campaign finances that I have spent to date will be made whole, was his exact words. And I said, what do you mean with that? He says they'll be repaid to you. Either Cliff will hire you as his campaign consultant for Clay County and pay you a salary, or he will help you raise money to repay those people who have contributed to your campaign. Now, let me say this. Here was the other side of the deal. I had to resign, announce that I was resigning at this fundraiser with Cliff Stearns and Speaker Boehner. Had to announce that I was resigning my candidacy for U.S. Congress, that I was supporting Cliff Stearns for Congress, and I would be willing to work in his campaign. Those are the 3 things that I was going to have to do. So number one, he was going to make my campaign whole in one of those 2 ways. Secondly, the U.S. Marshal's position was available if I get a Republican president.
Oh my
for
gosh.
appointment. The FDLE director would be mine if the U.S. Marshal position could not be made because a Democratic president was reelected if Obama goes back in office. He says now, something else he throws on the table at this point, those 3 are there. And he says if that doesn't, before that, the second thing he said, in addition to making the campaign whole, he said you are going to receive tickets to the Republican National Convention to be on the floor of the National Convention with VIP status. This had never come up.
Now, just so everybody knows, Kelly and I paid a bloody fortune to go to the Republican National Committee convention in D.C. in 2004. I know
how much they're worth.
Those are coveted.
Oh,
there's no price to pay. I mean, that is.
Yes. Wait till I tell you the conversation with Jim Horn about that issue.
Oh, Lord.
But those are coveted.
Can I get those tickets?
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what Jim Horn said.
It's a lot of fun, yeah.
So I said, wow. And he said, well, those are the 2 things we can do immediately. Then he says, here are the other things. The U.S. Marshal, head of FDLE, he says, if those don't work out, he said, then the Republican Party of Florida will hire you in any position you want. He said, if that's not okay with you, we can get you a lobbyist job in Tallahassee. Those are the 6 positions, and I know the lobbyist position in Tallahassee is going to pay 6 figures or more. They always do. So that's what they offered. And when he did that, I knew without a doubt he had stepped across the line. As a former police officer, I mean, it's obvious what he's just done.
That's terrible.
So I called my brother and told him, and he says, we're meeting with the Clay County Sheriff tomorrow morning, and we're going to meet with the state attorney's office. And so... And,
and to be real blunt with you, I mean, look, you're as you said, your brother is he's been in law enforcement how many years now?
30 plus years.
So he's been in longer than you and I combined. Yes. I mean, he's and so he thinks... he's got that. I got a CYA cover myself, and he's done investigations that are pretty substantial. I mean, right?
Well, the thing was this.
So he gets a hold of his boss real quick. Yes. Boss, this is way out of control.
Yeah, and he's
smart man.
And he said,
smart man.
He said, Jimmy, since you've told me, under Florida law,
I'm screwed too.
I have to go report it. And he says,
You know,
since they told you got to go report it.
You know, see, now think. I hope you people out there who are watching this understand. This man's brother is in law enforcement. He took an oath.
That's
You
correct.
know what's right and wrong. You tell your brother who says, I got an oath. We got to do this right.
That's correct.
Wow, what a breath of fresh air.
So we did. We went down at 8:30 and met with the sheriff the next morning.
Okay.
And
He was really happy to see you. I'm sure.
the chief prosecutor for Clay County, both of them were. They said, "Oh my gosh!"
So you got the sheriff, you got the chief prosecutor of Clay County
in the office, yes. And the sheriff said, essentially, "You've rung this bell. We've got to now move it forward." I mean, and my statement to the sheriff honestly was this: I said, "Tell me that what I've given you," and I had sat down that night and chronicalized all these conversations that I've just went over, dates, times, and what those conversations were. And I'm going to leave that document with you.
Okay, so you didn't go in saying, I want this guy prosecuted.
Oh, no. I went in and said, "Sheriff, if you'll tell me this is not illegal so that I cannot be prosecuted for failing to report something that I believe is illegal, then I'll walk away, I'll go back to campaigning, I'm happy." And he said, "Oh, no. This appears to be illegal. I'm calling the state attorney." And so he called Angela Corey with the state attorney's office. And she said the same thing.
Now, she is not the state attorney.
She is the state attorney for the 4th
Angela
Judicial
Corey.
Circuit.
Okay, I'm not familiar. Okay, so now we've got the sheriff and the state attorney for the 4th,
For
correct?
the 4th Judicial Circuit, yes.
They're advised as to what has happened, and she says what?
She says, "You're running for a federal office." She said, "If there is something illegal, it has to be turned over to the U.S. attorney." And so she said, "I'm going to contact them."
Okay, so put my little beanie cap on legal-wise. Federal trumps state, so she's not saying there's not a violation of state law,
Correct.
but because it's a federal office, it really needs to be handled on a federal level.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So she referred.
So we're not out of the woods on the state level. I mean, when I say we, those who are doing this are not out of the woods on a state level.
But to be completely honest, I think I don't think they would get involved in this. I mean, they could.
Well, Governor Scott, I mean, for all practical purposes, he fought a pretty hard campaign against a good old boy, McCollum. He's been kind of viewed as the outsider, so...
Thrasher was supporting McCollum. There's no doubt.
So, you know, a lot of people think that Scott's going to be a one-term governor, and they're going to get this guy out because he's not playing ball on some things. So, if he sees, I know that office watches our shows. I know that.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully they would and pick up.
Because this could then pick.
Yeah. Then the truth will come out.
The FDLE might actually pick it up. Okay, so where do we leave off? We've got the state attorney for the 4th and the sheriff in Clay,
who's having a heart attack right now. Although he is a very ethical, honest guy, he said, "Whoa, wait a minute."
Of course,
so,
I mean,
this is pretty, significant.
Oh, this is no different than if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, boss, we got somebody at the traffic division who siphoned off a couple $100,000 over. You'd just be like, "Oh my God!" You'd go after them with
everything I could.
Yep. Okay, let's continue.
All right. So, I receive a call from the FBI that night, which would be
because she called Justice.
She called Justice.
So Justice called the Bureau,
right.
And the Bureau works for the Treasury,
right?
And Treasury works for. I mean, they don't work for Justice, so there's two separate technical entities.
You have the prosecutorial side, Department of Justice, and you have the investigative side, which is the FBI.
Okay, now this is important. You're going to have to help me if I'm not mistaken. Barack Obama gets to appoint the head of justice, correct?
Yes.
And that would be Mr. Fast and Furious, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. I can't think of his name, but you're right. A Democratic appointee.
Right. So we've got the FBI, which works a little bit different.
Right.
So we've got the head of justice who serves at the pleasure of the president. The FBI, which is technically under Treasury, which is, go figure, that's Geithner. But the head of the FBI doesn't quite work that way. They're appointed for 10-year terms, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's the result. I want to give you all just a little bit of history. At age 29, the Federal Bureau of Investigation was being run by a fellow by the name of J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was born about 6 blocks from the Capitol. He's buried in the Congressional Cemetery. He died under the Nixon administration. If you look at our last show, I talked to you folks about the fact that, this guy had the dirt on everybody. He had Mimi Eisenhower. He had Truman's wife. I mean, he had the dirt on everybody. And so when he died during the Nixon administration, it was a major change. And what they did is they changed the laws so that the president could not appoint somebody to the FBI for life. It would be a 10-year appointment. They had to try to get the politics out of the Bureau. Hoover did some wonderful things for the Bureau. There's no doubt about it. But the reality is he was never a law enforcement officer. He was an attorney who assumed the highest position in this country, and it didn't turn out very well. So we've got basically a situation where now Mr. Mueller, wasn't Mueller a judge, a federal judge?
I'm not sure.
I don't remember anymore.
I know he was appointed by Bush.
But he's appointed by Bush, so he's a Republican.
He was a Republican appointee.
He's a Republican appointee.
So
that's very, very good. Big distinction. We've got a Republican appointee as the head of the FBI. We've got a Democratic appointee head of the Justice Department.
Correct.
Fourth Circuit, Republican or Democrat?
Republican.
She makes the referral to Justice. Justice obviously called the Bureau because that's the investigative arm.
Right.
And now you're contacted by the FBI.
That's correct.
I want to just make sure that we get this set up. Because let's be honest, you know and I know from campaigns, a lot of people don't really know their civics.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
That's true. That's
okay.
True. That's true. So.
Okay, now what happens?
So the FBI calls me and says that they would like to meet with me at 10 o'clock at the Jacksonville office of the FBI on Thursday morning, March the 1st. And so I said, no problem, I will be there. So my brother and I arrived at the FBI office actually around 9:30, went in and went into an interview room with 2 FBI agents.
Oh, they always do too.
2.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've been there.
We've been there.
So
we've all been there.
So there was one that did all the speaking. One agent did all the talking.
Yep.
And the other one did all the note taking. But
it's always that way.
It started off as I interpreted, a little suspicious in that he says, I just want you to know that the FBI does not get involved in political campaigns. And when he said that, I knew the direction the conversation was about to take. So I interrupted him and I said, hold on. I said, again, same thing I said to the sheriff. I said, Agent, I'm not here to press charges on anybody or to file any complaints. You tell me you've got this report that Angela Corey had sent over to them, this 6-page report of the chronology of events. I said, if you tell me that there's nothing wrong there, I'll go home and continue my campaign. And he immediately said, no, we've got some things we want to talk about. And so he began to ask me kind of what you're asking today, the personalities involved, who Jim Horn is, who Jett is, and so on. And I went through it with him. And he says,
because you would have to admit, if you and I were agents and you got this guy coming in, he's you want us
suspicious.
You want us to do your dirty work to get your opponent out of office.
That happens all the time in campaigns.
Now in this interview, I have a real quick question. Was it knowingly being recorded?
No, it was not.
Okay,
to my knowledge.
So, to your knowledge,
yeah, and I don't think it was. Actually, I don't think it was.
Fair enough.
Okay, and so he asked me. He said, "Are you willing to swear under oath to the statements in this document?" Now that's important because Cliff Stearns has not said anything in affidavit form to the FBI.
Okay.
I know that to lie to the FBI is a criminal offense. I said, I have no problem. Everything in that document is absolutely true. And he said, sign it. And I did. So I signed that document, which chronicalizes the events and really chronicalizes all of the conversations I had, including all the offers up to that point, up to February the 28th. And so I signed it. And then they said, would you be willing to call these individuals?
Now, let's pause for a second.
Okay.
So you've signed an affidavit.
Right.
And when you do that in the state of Florida, same to the federal government, if you lie under oath, that's perjury.
That's perjury.
It's a felony.
Yes.
So now you have gone way beyond. You've got yourself out there on a limb.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've done it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so he says, would you be willing to, with a taped conversation with a bug on your phone to call these individuals to be able to collaborate what you've placed in this report. And would you be willing to wear a body bug into the meeting on Friday at 3:30 the next day? And I said, hold on a second. I said, let me make sure. I said, if this is going to be worth it, if this is worth pursuing, if you truly believe it's a criminal matter, then I will do my duty, and I will do both of those. But if it's not going to be worth it, I don't want to waste your time or my time. And both agents says, no, it's worth it. We believe there's criminal misconduct. So I said, okay, I will do that. And so ended the conversation. We talked a little bit more, kind of ended it there. And he says, the agent says to me, I have to run this up through the ladder. And he said,
Okay, now, again, just to come for clarification, now what we have, and we're not going to add to our list because we've already got it. We've shown you the parties that are involved: Horn and Porter and Stearns and Thrasher, names that have been dropped: Curry, Lieutenant Governor Carroll, Sapp. I know that someplace along the line we've talked about Governor Scott, John Boehner, Speaker of the House, Pete Sessions, member of Congress from the state of Texas, the money guy. We've now have the FBI involved. We know that President Obama appoints Eric Holder as the head of justice. President Bush made a Republican appointment to the FBI, Mr. Mueller. Our agents now are going to have to run it up their chain of command. They've gone through everything, because that's the way the FBI always does. They don't do anything on spare of the moment. Everything kind of goes up. What are you thinking at this time?
Well, I'm thinking that everything's going to be okay, that I'm going to be able to do exactly what they want, that I would be able to, based on my statement, if I could collaborate on audio tapes with the FBI there, that it should be enough probable cause, as you and I both know, that I would be able to wear that body bug in there and confirm everything I said. He said that he had to send this up the ladder. When he meant ladder, he meant two ways, and he told me this. It had to go up through the Department of Justice, and it had to go up through the FBI. And so he said, I'll call you tomorrow. He said, I don't think there'll be a problem, but if we run into a problem, I'll let you know.
Okay.
That's how we ended it.
Now what?
The next morning, about 10 o'clock, he calls and said, that night, he called and he says, I'm having a little difficulty. I want to come to your house. He said, but I'm having a little difficulty getting approval to audio tape. He said, I'm waiting on approval from my superiors.
Now, just so everybody knows, we've not discussed this, but under no circumstances are we going to use the names of the agents. We're not going to identify them in any way, shape, or form. That's inappropriate.
That would be inappropriate, okay. Yes. So they came to my house about 7:30 on Wednesday night. No, on Thursday night, March the 1st. And
now, if somebody doesn't believe you, they had cell phones at the very least, didn't they?
Yes.
And those things are all tracked. Right. So
that's correct.
If somebody doesn't believe you and they want to push the envelope,
they can find out.
We can find out. Okay.
So they were at my house. My brother was there with me throughout all this, and they were waiting for approval. They had their devices there that would record my telephone conversations, and they received approval, or partially approval. He, got the call there. It was about 8 something. I've got the exact time. It escapes me. Right. But he received a call.
8:20, I think. 8:20. I think is what you said earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
From his superiors, and he says, "Okay, all right." He said, "Well, we can tape any person involved in this except Speaker Boehner." He said, "I cannot get approval to audio record Speaker Boehner in any form." And so I said, "Okay, well, he should not be at any of those places." So with both Judge Sapp and Jim Horn, because those are the two that we had telephone numbers to call. Yep. So we began with Judge Sapp. I had a recording device on my cell phone, and I called Judge Sapp, and they had instructed me to say this. They said, "We want you to tell them that you're willing to drop out of the congressional race, and you're willing to support Cliff Stearns." So I began the conversation this way. I said, "Judd, I've thought it over. Sorry I didn't call you back earlier, because I know that tomorrow is when the speaker's coming in, but I've decided to do what is right for the Republican Party. I'll drop out. I will support Cliff Stearns, and I will endorse him. And I'll do so tomorrow at your request, tomorrow at the meeting with the speaker." And he became ecstatic. I mean, he was just overjoyed. Now, all of this is on the audio tape. And I said, but before I do, I want to make sure that Cliff Stearns is on board. I said, because I still have a problem trusting him. And all of this was at the direction of the FBI, because we wanted to make sure we could tie Congressman Stearns into these conversations.
Well, that's the crux of the whole.
That's the crux. He's the only one to
None
benefit.
of these people have any interest in doing
No
this.
benefit. That's right. He's the only one to benefit. So during that conversation, he went over all 6 of those. They're doable. Everybody's in agreement. If Cliff Stearns doesn't agree with this, and I'll quote him, excuse my language, he said, if Cliff Stearns doesn't agree with this, I'll be pissed off.
Sure.
And so I said, okay. He says, call Jim Horn. He said, then Jim and I'll talk, and we'll talk to Cliff Stearns and get back with you. I said, all right. So I think it was like an 8-minute conversation. So he said, great. But the FBI agent said, look, make sure when you talk to Jim, under no uncertain terms, communicate to him that Boehner cannot be in this meeting on Friday at 3:30. He said, specifically state that or we're not going to get permission. So I said, okay, I will. So when I called Jim Horn, called him, left a message, he called me back within 3 minutes, again recording, and I told him essentially the same thing. I want to do what's best for the Republican Party, drop out, I was going to endorse Cliff Stearns, and for 10 minutes he talked. I didn't say a word, I just listened. He went over every one of those commitments. He talked about Cliff is going to do it. He says, when you get ready to run, when Cliff gets ready to retire in 4 to 6 years, you're going to run for Congress. We'll all support you. You're going to be the next congressman for District 3 when Cliff decides to get out. And when he finally quit talking and I got a breath, I said, well, a couple of things. You know, how can I trust Cliff Stearns? We'll make sure of it. He said, I will personally make sure of it. He said, if Cliff does not do what he says he's going to do, he said, I will go public with it. Now, this entire conversation is recorded. And I said, okay. I said, I do have one question, Jim. I said, Cliff Stearns cannot give me the director of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. That's a gubernatorial appointment. He said, Jim, I know Governor Scott very well. I'll get that for you. When he did that, the FBI agent gave a thumbs up. We talked another couple of minutes. He hung up. Before he hung up, he said, I'll call Judge Sapp. I'll call Cliff. We'll make sure everything's right. I said, okay. And he said, I'll text you back and let you know when the meeting is tomorrow. And confirm that it's at 3:30. Hung the phone up. In the meantime, the FBI agent immediately jumps up and says, I've got to get this to Washington. If they call you back, don't answer the phone, let it go to voicemail. And he left. Oh, and during that conversation, on 2 occasions, Jim Horn kept bringing up, make sure.
Wait a minute, Horn or Sapp?
Horn, because I've been instructed. Horn was bringing up during that conversation the fact that on Friday we would be meeting with Cliff Stearns and John Boehner. And I told him on 2 occasions, I do not want the speaker there. I want to talk specifically to Cliff Stearns. I said, I have a problem believing him, and I may be a little rude to Cliff Stearns that I don't want the speaker to endure. And when we left the conversation, Jim Horn said, I'll make sure the speaker's not there. We'll have a separate meeting with him. And that concluded the conversation. The FBI agents jumped up, headed out the door.
You've documented the date and time and everything on your affidavits where you've got a chronological series of events, and we're going to be able to put that up online here, right?
Right. And that's not an affidavit. That's just my notes.
Okay.
Right.
Have you provided any of this information to anybody else?
You know, the press has it, yes.
Who in the press has it?
Several different newspaper mediums have called me, and I provided it to them, yes. Florida Times Union. I think I may have given it here to the Ocala, but I may not have. But I know I've at least given it to the Florida Times Union. I've talked to so many.
Have you been contacted by any national news organizations on this?
Associated Press picked it up immediately.
Okay. Has anybody talked to you about the potential? Look, I'm in Ocala, Florida, my professional office building and our little studio here. Not too bad.
Little Jimmy Jett from Clay County, Florida. Jeez.
I mean, brother, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Did you ever think we'd be in this?
Oh my gosh!
And we just met.
Just met. That's correct. As a matter of fact, I contacted you.
You
I had my
did.
brother contact you and say, "Look, I'd like to talk to you."
Because I guess you've checked us out, and we don't pull any punches.
Don't pull any punches. And I liked what you had to say, and I said, I want to talk to this guy.
Okay. I may be completely off base, but the national ramifications of this are huge. I know what Gingrich went through. And I make no bones about it. I like Newt Gingrich.
Oh.
I understand his personal issues. I just don't care about that. I really don't. I want to go to the moon. I want us to go to Mars. I want us to think big. If the president doesn't think outside of the box and reject the box and lead this country, that's so important to me. At the same time, we need the entrepreneur, we need the manager, the technician. It's all got to work together. But I like Newt. I've met him several times. I know what they did to him. I know what Reagan went through with Iran-Contra. I know intricately the details. I don't know if you've ever followed the 1958 convention where Nixon brokered Earl Warren and Eisenhower. I know that whole scenario like the back of my. I could teach any college course on that. I understand 1968 in Chicago and Daley. I mean, I've read, I've studied. I know what the Bush administration went through with, all of the. I mean, I've always understood it. I think what you have here is an absolute explosive firebomb. I think I'm absolutely shocked that people like Maxine Waters and Barney Frank and that side of the crowd hasn't gone bananas. And it makes me think that this is just such everyday common stuff that they don't want to touch it because it's going to be Pandora's box. It's just a can of worms that I think you've opened up something that could absolutely shake this country to a core. And I think it's about damn time. I'm going to tell you straight up.
I appreciate that. I really
Somebody has to stand up and say the king is naked. And the fact that you've done it, that the FBI is actually on orders with your agents from somebody not to record Boehner is disturbing.
It's interesting you say that because my brother, like you and I being in law enforcement, he's been there a long time, looked at the agent when the agent said that and said we could not record Boehner. He said, I have investigated cases, thousands of cases where we've had recordings. And he said, I cannot ever remember any case, and it doesn't stand to reason that you would be able to record this one, and this one who's in a room involved in the same criminal activity, but you can't record this person. And the agent said, it is what it is.
It's not right, is it, brother?
Well, it's just one of those things. I mean, you can't fight against everybody. And these agents were very professional.
Oh, yeah.
And very apologetic to he and I, because he said the whole they've discussed this with other agents at the Jacksonville office. They've never seen anything like this.
Okay, so now they leave and they've got the tapes. You don't have access to those. They didn't give you a copy. That'd violate all procedures in the world. You filed your affidavits. What happened next?
Well, I received a call from Judge Sapp, probably about 15 minutes after they left, and he essentially said, and let me quote, and by the way, the call came in on my cell phone, and he left a voicemail message for which I still have.
Oh, can we have a copy of that?
If you can download it from my cell phone, you certainly can.
We'll try. I don't want to. Okay, so that.
If not, we can certainly record it off of this to another recording device because it's legally obtained.
Is legally obtained. I mean, he's left a message. The thing that I heard you on the radio the other day.
Right.
On 97.3.
Correct.
Chip Morris interviewed you.
Correct.
In all full fair disclosure, I hired him years ago to do some work for me. I've co-hosted on his show when his former co-host would be on vacation. We did call-ins in 2004 from the Republican National Convention. My wife and I went to a Salvation Army and got some bum clothes, we call it. I want you to know that. And we were actually in one of the protests, walking along, ho ho, Bush has to go and all that kind of stuff. So he had a ball to kind of get a flavor for what these guys were like. They didn't trust us. We were too clean cut, and all the NYPD cops were looking at us, winking and going, "Yeah, you're one of us." Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm from down Tampa. But we had a ball doing it. We'd call in on that. But I got the impression that he didn't. You're the bad guy. Not. He didn't say that. But it's like, you got any proof? What's going to happen?
That was an interesting interview. I mean, I was having to defend all of this.
You're having to defend doing the right thing.
And doing the right thing. And number one, I've signed an affidavit, and I told him that under threat of perjury, and yet Cliff Stearns has not signed anything. As a matter of fact, all of Cliff's comments are coming through a third party. Again, just like he uses third parties.
Yeah.
And now he's using a third party to make just
Richard Nixon did that.
laughable.
Halderman,
Yes.
Ehrlichman. I mean, you always, everybody but the boss.
Everybody but the boss.
Everybody but the boss. Okay, so he calls, leaves a message, and then what happened then?
All right. Well, his message was essentially, and I'll quote it, and then we can get it off my phone. It says, "Jimmy, the meeting is on now." He was going to call Cliff Stearns and Jim Horn to make sure they are in all agreement
Sure.
with the 6 offerings. My house at 3:30, just like you wanted. Jim has heard it. I have heard it, and reconfirmed the other agreements. Reconfirmed, obviously, with Cliff Stearns. Looks like to me it's about as good as we can get. Nobody balked at anything. The meeting is at 3:30. Jim is going to be there to make sure more than one person hears the conversation, quote unquote. So let me know that Cliff Stearns was on board, Jim Horn was on board, and Judge Sapp was on board, and that's who was going to be at the meeting on Friday at 3:30. And so I immediately called the FBI on the cell phone and told him about this conversation. I told him that it had been left on my voicemail. He said, great. And at that time, it's kind of interesting because he said, I've already gotten approval from one side, but I'm waiting on approval from the other side. Which side it was, I don't know. So I said, okay. And so he said, I'll call you tomorrow. And so about 10 o'clock on Friday morning, the FBI agent called me and says, I'm having difficulty getting approved for the body wire. And he says, but can I come to your house and we can stand by up until 3:30, and hopefully we'll get the approval. And if so, we'll immediately attach the body wire to you and you can go to the meeting. So I said, sure. So my brother and I met him at my house, and we literally sat there from around 10:30 until 3 o'clock waiting for approval from, he said, Washington, to be able to go in there with a body wire and confirm all of these conversations which were recorded, all of these offers. And up until 3 o'clock, he still had not received confirmation. Now, I received one other call. They actually took a lunch break around 1 o'clock or something, the two agents did. And I received another call from Judge Sapp, and I didn't answer the phone. And Judge Sapp at this time, this is also the second recording on my phone. And he said, it was on March the 2nd at 1:22 p.m. Left this on my voicemail on my private phone. Said, Jimmy, hey, this is Judd. We are still on for 3:30. Cliff is going to get here around 4, as he is having to ride with the speaker. The speaker is going to be a little late. Come on around 3:30, and so on and so on. So that presented a problem, because now all of a sudden the speaker has been inadvertently reinserted into this equation for this meeting. So I called the FBI agent.
You shouldn't have done that.
In retrospect, that might have been a good idea.
Should have forgotten that conveniently.
So anyways, I told him that, and he said, well, we do have a problem. So he came on back to my house, and at about 10 after 3, we began to talk while he was waiting on confirmation. And I told him, I said, look, agent, I am not going to allow them to think that I am getting out of this race. So at 3:15 is the drop dead line. I'm only doing this because you asked me to do this. And I said, either I get approval to wear a wire at 4 o'clock at this meeting, the new time of this meeting, or I'm going over there at 3:30, and as soon as Cliff Stearns and whomever comes in that meeting, I am telling them whatever you allow me to tell them, but I'm telling them I'm not dropping out of this race. So he received a call about 10 after 3, and we could hear his side of the conversation. He was very professional with it. Somewhat a discussion with whomever he was talking to erupted, and he said, I can't understand why that we can't do this, but nevertheless, he hung the phone up and said, you cannot wear a wire. And you cannot record either Speaker Boehner nor Cliff Stearns. And that was the conversation. I could not record either one of them. So my statement to him was, all right, let's talk about escaping. I need an escape clause now. I said, what can I talk about? And he said, let me call my superior. And he did. He called somebody in the FBI office, and he got off the phone. He says, you can talk about it all. And my brother said, well, it's my understanding in a federal investigation that you're not allowed to talk about it. He said, we're giving you specific permission because we were not able to do what we thought we could do to talk about any facet of this. And he says, but our response is going to be, we have no comment. We're neither going to confirm nor deny because it is an ongoing investigation. He said we could arrest Judge Sapp and Jim Horn right now. He says, but now whether we will or not is going to be something that's going to be discussed by my superiors. So I said, okay, fine. And we shook hands, parted ways, and I went to the meeting.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground. You okay with this?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm fine.
You go to the meeting. Anybody come with you?
Yeah, my brother also came with me there.
Okay. What happened?
We got there about 3:30.
And this is, again, we're back at Sapp's house, correct?
Judge Sapp's house. And it's where
this is like the center where everything is spinning, right?
Center of the universe.
Oh, boy.
So this is where speaker is supposed to come at around 5 o'clock, according to his itinerary. From 5 to 6, be there for reception and for some fundraising at his residence.
And let's be real matter of fact. The speaker is under the protection of the I don't believe the Secret Service, but you have the Capitol Police. I mean, he has an entourage that follows him. I mean, there are security protocols. He was there, right?
Right.
And you saw him.
No, the speaker I did not.
You did not see the speaker.
No, he wasn't. He came later after I left.
After you left.
Yes.
But were there any security precautions ahead of time?
Oh, yes.
There were people who were obviously...
There was a Secret Service agent inside that I recognized
right.
because my son is a Secret Service agent, and he had the Secret Service emblem on his coat.
Means the number 3 man in line, or
Some
president,
Secret
vice
Service.
president, speaker. We security is pretty serious. So
Yes.
I mean, this is a little... If you're lying, this is one hell of a lie, right?
Oh,
I mean...
Well, I can assure you I'm telling the truth.
Okay,
right.
fair enough. I mean, everything is falling into place. Okay, so you get to the Sapp's house, and now what happens?
Well, we wait for Cliff Stearns to get there, and so we actually go into an office inside of Mr. Sapp's house, his office inside there, and we sat down. My brother, myself, Judge Sapp, and Jim Horn. At about 4 o'clock, Cliff Stearns comes in. The speaker is not with him, so he walks in. We close the door. He shakes my hand like I'm his long lost friend. Tells me how good it is to see me, and so on and so on, and he sits down, and I immediately say, hey, you guys don't have to say anything. Things have changed. And they got kind of a astonished look on their face. I said, number 1, I'm not dropping out of the race, Cliff. Number 2, I'm not endorsing you. And number 3, I'm not working in your campaign. And so they're not saying anything. I said, as a matter of fact, I have been communicating and working with the FBI, and I've communicated your offers, and they have an open investigation on you, Cliff Stearns, on you, Judge Sapp, and on you, Jim Horn. And I can honestly say Judge Sapp immediately said, I didn't know I was doing anything criminal. Jim Horn leaned back in his seat and says, I'm not saying a thing. And Cliff didn't say a thing at that point in time.
What was his facial expression?
Oh, they were just in shock. How dare anyone, come forward, or how dare anyone not accept our deal? I mean, they were completely convinced. They had told people in the audience, I was told the next day, that Jett's going to announce. And one of my supporters said, well, I gave him a couple of checks last week, and he told me he wasn't getting out. They said, quote unquote, to this guy, and I have his name, he says, we've made him an offer he can't refuse, like the Godfather.
Okay, now that's important.
That is important.
I don't want to discuss this man's name. Don't do that. Since this has all occurred, has he asked for his money back from you?
No, he has not.
Has he been one of those who has he lost his spine in his support for you?
He has not.
Okay. Because a lot that has happened, right? I mean,
Right.
Ever since Stearns, somebody has put the word out and put the kibosh to your fundraising and everything else, right?
It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Just dried right
Dried
up.
up.
Yep, some of us can all relate to that nonsense. Okay. So this fellow, if he is asked, will, as far as you know right now, would verify and vouch for that.
I'm sure he would. Now I'm sure that if they told him, they told others there. So I'm sure with
So they got a problem.
little bit of investigative effort, they could prove that.
So if somebody comes to one of you folks and you're asked to testify under oath, either you take the Fifth Amendment, which would be that's your right, or you tell the truth, right?
That's correct.
Oh, wow, 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 wow. This is a neat little novel we got going here.
It is.
Okay, so you tell him that Stearns they can't believe that you've turned him down. What happens? You get up and walk out. You say thank you very much.
I tell him then. I said, look, don't ever call me again, and don't have anyone make any offers. And actually, Cliff Stearns says, well, I guess this meeting is over. And I said, I guess it is. Lasted probably 5 minutes.
I've heard that phrase before. I guess this meeting. Yes, I
have. Have you? Well, that's what he said. Exactly, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Oh, before he said that though, he said, are you saying that the FBI is investigating me? I said, yeah. He said, get my chief of staff in there. And he was talking to Judge Sapp, a very well-respected, very influential, very wealthy individual.
Now, Sapp has made money in the real estate, railroad business, right?
Oh, and he says this to him, go get my chief of staff, like Judd works for him or something. And Judd sat there. It must have been 5 seconds. He was in shock. Never got up, never responded. Jim Horn jumps up, runs to the door, gets his chief of staff to come in. But that showed you the mindset of Cliff. That all of these guys are just nothing to him. They're, you do what I say.
A lot of these people who make their money seem to have connections to government.
I'm sure
we call it crony capitalism on our show. We talk about pure capitalism. We talk about socialism. We talk about crony capitalism. If you're in the railroad business, you've got to have a lot of government contracts. You're a lobbyist. I mean, a lot. So they've got a vested interest in making sure their fella or their boy stays in office.
I would say yes. I would say yes.
And did you ever think you were being set up? I mean,
from the start.
I mean, my gosh, you're finance guy, and then
yes,
it's almost like they intentionally in the very beginning just got you in there to get you out and set you up to fail.
Do I believe that they would have delivered any of these? No. I absolutely believe that if once I made that announcement, they would have patted me on the back and said, nice of you. But when I called and said, hey, what about my tickets to the National Convention? They said, what are you talking about? Yep. So, I mean, these are the type of characters that you're dealing with. For a sitting congressman to conduct himself in this manner is it's just unbelievable.
Now what happens?
Well, now I asked the FBI what I could do, and I told them I was
but you left.
I left.
You left. Your brother leaves, and
that's it.
I'm sure there wasn't a lot of shaking hands.
They were from what I've heard, they were in shock.
Yeah.
The announcement didn't occur like everybody thought.
Yeah.
Speaker Boehner came there. I was not there to meet him, so so from what I've taught, he did his thing and he left.
Okay, what date was that again?
That was March the 2nd.
And what has happened since then?
Well, last Wednesday, I've been talking with my campaign staff. Well, actually, what happened was I went home pretty despondent that night.
Oh, sure.
Because, I wanted the truth to come out. I wanted people to know that this is going on.
It's not the Republican Party you signed up for.
This is not the Republican Party. And I would hope that the Republican Party is not like this, and I don't believe they are. I'm hoping there's isolated individuals. I hope this is not business as usual, although it quite possibly may be with the attitude these guys had. But I went home pretty despondent, and actually about 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and said, wait a minute, I've got voicemails and text messages from these guys that corroborates what's went on. And so based on that, these voicemails that I've read, a couple of them to you, that I said, well, I'm willing to go public with this. And I did so Wednesday of this week.
And it hit the fan.
It hit the fan. In the audience at the South Clay Republican Party meeting, I asked for permission to speak. I had the affidavit in my hand. I talked about every personality in here and told them that I was going public. And the press had picked up on that and had an Florida Times Junior reporter there. He immediately put it on the paper, and I began to get calls from the Associated Press and roll call in Washington and several other news media agencies throughout Florida and throughout in Washington.
Now that's Wednesday. We've not communicated. Well, we met today.
We met today, yeah, that's correct.
And we're recording this ahead of time. What is the date? Today is the 10th of March. We happened to do a show on Thursday, completely unbeknownst to when we had our show completely lined up what we were going to do, we looked at the newspaper, saw that Star Banner picked it up. I got online, literally, just so you know, at 5 o'clock. I looked at my wife and I said, because the way we do things throughout the week, we just gather stories. We kind of know a general flavor, but everything we do is just off the cuff, like what we're doing right now.
Kind of like Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, absolutely. Except we don't have to do the commercial. We control everything. We don't. This is a long interview, but I think it had to take place for the whole story to come out. Okay. 5 o'clock, I said, "Oh my gosh, look at the paper. What's going on?" So we took literally 15 minutes. I got on the internet. I looked up you. I looked up Stearns. I looked up everybody. I verified. I made a few phone calls. At the last minute, we had a whole show that was going to be focusing on the Hatch Act and other allegations that need to come out involving the sheriff's race here. And all of a sudden, look at this. And we've had it. My gosh, this ties right in perfectly. It goes back to Karen Thurman and all the things that we have experienced. And I said, oh, this is huge. And then we got a contact form, I guess, from your brother. We spoke, and you're here, and here's the rest of the story. The power of the internet, and I just can't. I'm shocked, because it's some of the same stuff I experienced 30 years ago as a cop. Things that you've experienced as a county commissioner. It's just, this is not the United States of America that I want to live in. I mean, I'm not leaving,
Right.
but this is not right. It's just not right. Fundamentally not right.
Well,
you have a right to run without this kind of. I have the right to vote for you if I want. You're not in my district, but if I, yeah,
right.
it's just not right.
Yeah.
So what was the response to Clay County? What did they say?
It's been overwhelmingly positive. I mean, on my Facebook account, they've been just going on there, and it's, every once in a while you get someone that tries to defend Cliff Stearns, but most of them, I believe, believes me. Number one, because I have an affidavit that I've given to the FBI. I am out on a limb should I be lying. All the statements from Cliff Stearns, not any of those that he's alleging are provable through a third party's alleging. I challenged him on a radio station yesterday. I said, have him, since he's making these statements, have he and Jim Horn and Judge Sapp contact the Jacksonville FBI office and do an affidavit of truth of what they're saying. The FBI would love to talk to them, I'm sure. They're not going to do that. They got one of three choices: stay silent, tell the truth and get arrested, or lie. And at some point in time, the FBI will close this investigation, whether it's next month, next year. And when it does, under the Freedom of Information Act, I'm going to request the transcripts of those tapes.
You see, the problem is you have to go public with this because all of this takes place. As we all know, they can drag their feet, and the election takes place. It's all said and done. You had to do this. So it wasn't, some kid throwing sand at another kid in a sandbox. You have no choice.
Well, and let me issue this challenge on your show, because I've thought about this, because I resent people standing up and just bald-faced lying. I don't know whether it's the police in me or whatever, but I just resent it. I'm challenging Cliff Stearns here today. I will take a polygraph test. We'll do it through some law enforcement agency, so it'll be fair. We'll get together and choose it. And I'll take a polygraph test. If I fail it, which I won't, but if I fail it, I will withdraw from the race and publicly apologize to him. But when I pass it, and I will, I expect him to take it. And when he fails it, I want him to man up, tell the truth, and then pay the price just like any other criminal would.
Do you think he has breached his fiduciary duty and responsibility to the electorate that he should resign?
I think he has. Now, whether he will or not, no, he's not going to. He's too arrogant. He's too entrenched. He's got the Potomac fever. I mean, he has it, a case of it, and so he's not going to get out, or not going to resign. Now, he may get out because, as I said, when I entered the race, I think I could beat him in Clay. I sincerely believe I could beat him in Clay County. I've won my last two elections against a Republican who was a former county commissioner at 68% and 70%. So I know the people in Clay County support me, and I believe don't believe they're going to allow anyone, whether it's Cliff Stearns or anyone else, to establish an address in Orange Park and then run for an office and portray himself as a person from Clay County.
You know, Dennis Kucinich lost his reelection, and there's talk about him moving to Washington State
to run. I saw that in the paper. Yes.
This sounds.
It's just obscene that they would even think they could.
Stearns and Kucinich.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we talked about earlier how Stearns has had a very unusual, unholy alliance with Corrine Brown.
Oh.
Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Well, he is on one side of the fence. He talks about how a strong Republican he is, but then when you look at the proof, it's kind of hypocritical. In 2008, 2009, 2010, and you can go online and find this, he's had 47 earmarks. Of those 47, 13 of them were co-sponsored by Corrine Brown. A couple of them was co-sponsored by Wasserman, who is the Democratic chairman of the National Party. I mean, he's in bed with the Democrats. They have a different philosophy than we do, a different ideology than we do. We can no longer, play tag with the other party. We've got to stand up if we're going to restore America, and that's why I'm running. I don't care what they want to do. We've got to stop spending. We've got to reduce the deficit, and earmarks is one of the problems. On one side, he says we need to, we need to, pay down the deficit, but at the same time, $85 million of pork barrel projects he's brought. So I understand that this year he's taken a position that he's no longer going to do earmarks, or he's going to take a different stand on those.
We've devoted the vast majority, obviously, this entire discussion about your background, and then we went into this quagmire. Let's wrap up with a couple of items. Okay. Are there any additional items that would be of substance to what the bribery, for a lack of that took place? Is there anything else that we haven't covered that I don't know? Okay, do me a favor. Let's hit some issues.
Okay,
you're running for Congress. We know the reasons why. I don't think anybody can question your credentials and what you're trying to accomplish. Give us your belief structure. Let's start with taxes. We'll start with taxes, and I'm going to throw them out. Give me your sound bites. Let's run through. And your website is we've got what is it again? It's
JamesJettForCongress.com.
James James Jett Jett, right? The word for FOR Congress.com. JamesJettForCongress.com. When you go there, you'll see this guy. There he is. And look, I got to tell you. Remember, folks, law enforcement, county commissioner is taking on the good old boy system. Somebody tried to bribe him, got the guy stone cold, bye-bye, jail, the whole 9 yards. Clerk of the court, I mean, you've done it. Family, impressive. Let's hit some issues. Taxes.
No raising taxes. I'm not going to support it. I think that in Washington right now we have not so much a tax problem as we have a spending problem.
Right.
What we need to do is stop raising taxes and raise taxpayers.
Okay. The United Nations.
I would love to do away with them. I think their effectiveness is gone. I think they are more progressive than I would believe, and I just don't think they do anything good for America.
Subsidies for bailouts, Wall Street, etc.
Don't agree with them. The free market enterprise system should work on its own, just like our constitutional fathers drafted the Constitution to do.
The United States Constitution has the supreme law of the land, yes or no?
Yes, it is.
Two people who are Muslim that believe in Sharia law go to court and want to use Sharia law. Should they be allowed to do that?
Absolutely not.
Should two people who want to use a papacy law, let's say from the Catholics, can they do that?
No, they should abide by the Constitution.
Hindus,
No.
Okay. What do you think about immigration? Obviously, we're a peninsula, but still, we've got the islands, we've got Cuba, we have folks that come across. What do you think about immigration? What needs to happen?
With my background in law enforcement, I feel probably just like you feel, and I haven't talked to you about it, but number one, those that are here illegally need to go back. We need to stop the illegal immigration in some manner. That's going to be a very tough, maybe a very costly process to go through. But we have two problems. Number one, they're coming here illegally. Number two, we have all types of individuals coming here. Our borders are a sieve. People can come through them. It's a disgrace to America that anyone can cross our border so easily. So we've got to solve that problem. That's going to be a very comprehensive problem. It has to be solved. We have to be aggressive. We have to send those back, let them go through the process, the illegal immigrants. And if they are acceptable and meet the laws and meet the guidelines that we establish, allow them in.
First strike. The Bush Doctrine is basically one in which if the United States is at risk, we do not expect to be hit first. We can hit first. We do not have to be hit. We can strike first. Bush Doctrine. Iran is getting close to potentially a weapon. Any feelings there?
Well, in the Congress, in the House side, we don't deal with foreign policy. But yes, my feelings are this. We should support Israel at all cost. And if Iran is developing a nuclear weapon, we know what they're going to do with it. So we should support Israel, or we should take on Iran ourselves. We cannot afford to allow them to have a nuclear weapon.
The presidency of the United States, a lot of us feel, has become an imperial presidency. We basically elect a dictator for 4 years. The Congress has abdicated a lot of responsibility. Things like the War Powers Act. A man can go to war, and we find ourselves in a Donnybrook real quick. Do you think we need to clamp down on some of the powers of the presidency, or do you?
Absolutely, he's trampling on the Constitution, both with Obamacare and others. I mean, we have got to hold his feet to the fire that he does not step over that boundary into what is the legislative responsibilities versus the executive responsibilities, which he's done with both Obamacare and with his recess appointments. So yes, we have to get the presidency back under control. Now, what does that mean? I mean, not only from that perspective, but on the other side of the coin, we have to have a balanced budget. And I actually think the president should have some veto power so we can hold him accountable from a budget standpoint over Congress.
So we did pass a line item veto. The Supreme Court turned it over. Let's do it again?
Yes. Let's find out what the problems were with it and try to redraft it and make it constitutionally feasible.
A couple other quick items. I hate to say this, but Al Gore and his green energy that the whole world's burning up, yada, yada, yada. Do you buy it? Any of that?
Not at all.
You think the world is just in a cycle and they just...
I think they're on a cycle, and I think that from a national security standpoint, we should be doing a lot more. The Keystone Pipeline should be approved, both from an economic standpoint and from a national security standpoint. We should drill, baby, drill. I think there's enough safeguards in that industry now to safely be able to go into those areas and drill for energy products, for oil, with enough safeguards that if something happens, they'll do like they did in the coast. I mean, you can say what you want to, but BP stood up. They did the best they could do, and rather than stop,
things happen.
Things happen. We can't be absolutely safe and all that. So I agree. Drill, baby, drill. We need to go.
I'm going to ask you one last question. We'll wrap this up. And I know you're not prepared for this one. This is my one. There's a thing called the Monroe Doctrine, and President Monroe said, "Look, South America, we can't have foreign influences come in. The Americas is ours, and we got to protect it." China's making a lot of headway. Russia came in with Cuba years ago. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy talked about the Monroe Doctrine, etc. It seems to me that some of these long, well-heeled policies are falling away. Does it concern you that we've got some outside influences across the world coming in South America, and these folks got a direct pipeline right up? Narco-terrorism and immigration, does that concern you? And are you willing to get out and kind of demand that we put the pedal to the metal and get out?
Oh, absolutely. We should do whatever we need to do as a people, as a Congress, as the American democracy we have to protect our homeland. And that means anything. I mean, that means if we are encountering individuals or groups or countries that are threatening our homeland, we should do whatever that we need to do to protect our homeland.
Well, we have covered a lot of stuff. I really do appreciate your time. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Paul.
We're going to wrap up. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, one and all, this has been a special edition. And just remember, you can go to James Jett, Jett, just like a jet flying over the sky there, James Jett for Congress. Use the word for, F-O-R, congress.com. Look at the website, get on there, sign up, see what he has to say. That was impressive. I will tell you, very few people impress me with their integrity and willingness to stand up and say, no, I'm not taking this anymore. This man's done it, and that was good. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week. Same time, same channel. Have a great day.